Picture this: you're trapped on a wooden ship in the middle of the North Atlantic. The temperature has plummeted to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Ice is forming on every surface. Waves crash over the deck, soaking you to the bone. And here's the terrifying part: you cannot light a fire. One spark could send your entire vessel up in flames, leaving you to drown in freezing waters hundreds of miles from land. This was reality for Viking warriors and explorers. So how did they survive weeks, sometimes months, in these deadly conditions? The answer will shock you, because it's not what you think. Welcome back to Frestivian, where we explore history's most extreme survival stories. Today, we're diving into one of the greatest mysteries of the Viking Age. How did Norse seafarers endure brutal winter voyages across the most dangerous waters on Earth without the one thing we think we need most: fire? The Vikings weren't just raiders and warriors. They were master survivalists who conquered the North Atlantic using knowledge passed down through generations. From Iceland to Greenland, from Norway to Newfoundland, these ancient mariners developed techniques so effective that modern survival experts are still studying them today. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly how they did it. And trust me, some of these methods are so ingenious, you could use them yourself in a survival situation. So make sure you watch until the end, because the final technique is the most crucial one, and it's not what anyone expects. Let's set sail into the frozen past. Before we reveal their secrets, you need to understand just how brutal these conditions were. Viking longships were open vessels. Unlike later sailing ships with enclosed cabins and below-deck areas, a longship was essentially a large wooden canoe with a single sail. There was nowhere to hide from the elements. When storms hit, everyone on board was exposed to wind, rain, sleet, and snow. The North Atlantic in winter is one of the most hostile environments on the planet. Temperatures regularly drop below freezing. Waves can reach heights of 30 feet or more. Storms appear with little warning. And the waters are so cold that falling overboard means death in minutes, not hours. Now here's the critical problem. Viking longships were made of wood, sealed with tar, and often coated in oil to protect the timber. Fire on board wasn't just dangerous, it was absolutely forbidden during rough seas. A single flame could ignite the tar, spread to the sail, and consume the entire ship before anyone could stop it. So the Vikings had to survive without fire for warmth, without fire for cooking, and without fire for drying their clothes. They had to rely on other methods. And these methods were absolutely brilliant. The first survival secret was their clothing system, and it was far more sophisticated than most people realize. Vikings didn't just throw on animal furs and hope for the best. They used a precise layering system based on understanding how the body loses heat and how to prevent it. The foundation was always wool. Not cotton, not linen for winter voyages, wool. And here's why this matters. Wool remains insulating even when wet. When you sweat or get splashed by seawater, cotton becomes useless and actually draws heat away from your body. Wool doesn't. It retains up to 80% of its insulating properties when saturated. Viking base layers were made from tightly woven wool tunics and pants. These sat directly against the skin, creating the first barrier against cold. Over the base layer, Vikings wore thicker wool garments called wadmal, a dense, felted wool fabric that was nearly windproof. This was their insulation layer. The Vikings understood something modern outdoor enthusiasts know well. Dead airspace is the best insulator. The wadmal trapped pockets of warm air around the body. The final layer was weatherproof. Vikings wore cloaks and overgarments made from seal skin, reindeer hide, or sheepskin with the wool still attached. These outer layers were often treated with fish oil or animal fat to make them water-resistant. But here's the genius part: these weren't just random layers. Vikings could add or remove pieces based on activity level. If they were rowing hard and generating body heat, they'd strip down to the base layer. When resting, they'd wrap up in everything. This adaptive layering system is the same principle used by modern Arctic explorers. The Vikings figured it out 1,000 years ago. At night, temperatures on the open sea dropped even further. This is when Vikings deployed their second survival weapon, the fat. The fat was essentially the world's first sleeping bag, but calling it that doesn't do it justice. This was an engineered survival system. A fat was made from multiple reindeer or seal skins sewn together with the fur on the inside. The skins were carefully selected, reindeer from animals that had just grown their thick winter coats, seals from the fattest specimens. The natural oils in these skins provided additional insulation and water resistance. When a Viking crawled into a fat and cinched it closed, they created a microclimate. Their body heat was trapped inside the furs, and the airspace between the skin layers acted as additional insulation. Even in sub-zero temperatures, a person in a fat could maintain a survivable body temperature throughout the night. Here's where it gets even more interesting. Vikings often shared fats or slept close together under a larger hide covering. 2 or 3 men sharing body heat could survive conditions that would kill a person sleeping alone. Modern military survival training teaches the exact same technique. It's called buddy warming, and it saved countless lives. The Vikings were doing it routinely on their ocean voyages. The fat also protected against wind and seawater spray, the 2 biggest killers in maritime survival situations. Even if waves crashed over the deck, the person inside the fat stayed relatively dry, and their core temperature remained stable. You can't survive cold without fuel. The human body is a furnace, and in freezing conditions, it burns through calories at an incredible rate. Vikings needed food that was calorie-dense, long-lasting, and didn't require cooking. The staple food on winter voyages was dried cod and other fish. Vikings would catch fish during summer, split them open, and dry them on racks in the wind. This process removed moisture, preventing spoilage, while concentrating the proteins and fats. A single piece of dried fish could contain 500 calories or more. Vikings would chew on this throughout the day, giving their bodies constant fuel to generate heat. Pork, mutton, and beef were smoked and heavily salted before voyages. The salt acted as a preservative, and the smoking process added additional flavor while killing bacteria. These meats were incredibly dense in calories and could last for months without refrigeration. Here's something most people don't know. Vikings carried containers of butter and animal fat on their voyages. Fat contains more than twice the calories per gram as protein or carbohydrates. In extreme cold, fat is survival fuel. Vikings would eat chunks of cold butter or mix it with dried fish. Modern mountaineers and polar explorers do the exact same thing. They consume high-fat foods because fat generates the most body heat during digestion. Vikings also brought skyr, a thick, fermented dairy product similar to yogurt. It was rich in protein and fat, and the fermentation process meant it wouldn't spoil quickly. They also carried dried cheese that could last for months. Contrary to popular belief, Vikings didn't drink much alcohol during dangerous winter voyages. Alcohol actually lowers your core body temperature and impairs judgment. But they did carry small amounts of weak beer, 2 to 3% alcohol, which provided calories and was safer to drink than potentially contaminated water. The Vikings discovered something that modern science has confirmed. Controlled physical activity is one of the best ways to stay warm. On a typical longship, crews were divided into rowing shifts. Even when the sail was up, men would row in rotation. This served 2 purposes. It kept the ship moving efficiently, and it kept the crew warm. Rowing is full-body exercise. It generates tremendous amounts of body heat. Vikings would row hard for 30 minutes to an hour, building up internal warmth, then swap out with a rested crew while they recovered under their furs. Vikings understood that you couldn't stay warm just by exercising non-stop. You'd exhaust yourself and run out of calories. Instead, they used a cycle, intense activity to generate heat, followed by rest wrapped in furs to conserve that heat. This prevented both hypothermia and exhaustion, a delicate balance that required experience and discipline. Even when not rowing, crew members were kept busy with tasks, adjusting the sail, bailing water, maintaining equipment, checking cargo. This constant low-level activity kept blood flowing and bodies warm without burning through energy reserves. Modern survival experts teach the same principle. In cold weather, keep moving, but pace yourself. The longship itself was part of the survival system. Viking ship designers understood how to minimize cold exposure. When conditions became truly dangerous, Vikings would rig a large sealskin or wool tent over part of the ship. This created a sheltered area where crew members could huddle together, protected from wind and spray. This wasn't a permanent structure, it was deployed only in the worst conditions, because it interfered with ship operation. But when a storm hit at night, this tent could mean the difference between life and death. Vikings knew which spots on the ship were most protected from wind. The area just behind the mast, for example, created a wind shadow. Experienced sailors would position themselves there during rest periods. They also knew to stay low. Wind speed increases with height, so lying flat on the deck was warmer than sitting upright. Longships carried ballast stones and cargo in the center of the hull. This created a slightly lower area where crew members could huddle, getting below the worst of the wind. This final secret is the most important, and it's the one modern people often overlook: mental toughness. Vikings were culturally and psychologically prepared for suffering. From childhood, they were exposed to cold, taught to endure discomfort, and trained in mental resilience. Viking culture glorified toughness and endurance. Complaining about cold or hardship was seen as weakness. This wasn't cruelty, it was survival training. When you're on a ship in the middle of winter, panic and despair kill faster than cold. Vikings survived as a group. They sang working songs, told stories, and maintained morale. Modern military units use the same techniques. When everyone is suffering together and supporting each other, individuals can endure far more than they could alone. Vikings didn't expect comfort. They knew winter voyages would be brutal, and they accepted it. This mental preparation prevented the psychological collapse that often accompanies unexpected hardship. Every Viking sailor was extensively trained. They knew their ship, their equipment, and their survival techniques intimately. This knowledge created confidence, and confidence prevents panic. Modern survival psychology confirms this. The most important survival tool is your mind. So there you have it, the complete system Vikings used to survive freezing winter voyages without fire. It wasn't one trick or one piece of gear. It was an integrated approach: layered wool clothing that worked when wet, fat sleeping systems that created life-saving microclimates, high-calorie foods that fueled their body's internal furnace, strategic activity that generated heat without exhausting them, smart use of ship design to minimize exposure, and iron mental toughness developed from childhood. The Vikings weren't superhuman. They were ordinary people with extraordinary knowledge. Knowledge that was refined over generations of harsh experience. Knowledge that saved lives in the most brutal conditions Earth can create. And here's what's amazing: these techniques still work. Modern survival experts use the same principles. Wool base layers, sleeping bag systems, high-fat foods, controlled activity, mental preparation. The Vikings figured it out 1,000 years ago, and we're still learning from them. If you found this fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe to Frustivian for more extreme survival history. Drop a comment below. Which of these Viking techniques surprised you most? And what historical survival topic should we cover next? Until next time, stay curious, stay tough, and remember, humans are more resilient than we think. The Vikings proved it every time they sailed into the frozen unknown.